So let's start. I'm going to introduce our panelists today. On my far left side, your far right side, we have Sruti Bala. She is an author and associate professor at the Department of Theater Studies at the University of Amsterdam. Her research interests are at the intersection of performance and politics, which has taken shape in specific projects on nonviolent protest, participatory art, artistic activism, and feminist, post-colonial, and decolonial theory. Please give a warm welcome to Sitting right next to her is Ira Melkonyan. She is a Ukrainian performance artist and microbiologist. She's one of the founding members of Maltese artist group The Rubber Bodies Collective, where she co-authored several performances, installations, interventions, and publications. And in her work, she often uses domestic chemicals and DIY materials to construct her improvised laboratory setups and scenographic and performative experiments. This Monday at Spring Festival, she will present a work-in-progress version of her upcoming performance Bloodthirsty in het Huis, in which she will explore both the biological and cultural contexts of blood and how they relate to physical borders and the human sense of connectedness. Please give a warm welcome to Ira. Lastly, we have Alaa Minawi, who is a Dutch-Lebanese-Palestinian artist based in Amsterdam. His work ranges between performing arts and installations. He started his career as a light designer and scenographer, and later pivoted to creating his own autonomous work, focusing on the theme of belonging and its relationship to physical spaces. This led to the performance cycle 2048, of which the latest part, Identity and Dissolution, was shown at last year's Spring Festival. This year, Alaa is presenting his installation My Light is Your Light at the right side of the Schouwburg, right outside. Oh, there? Okay. Behind the Schouwburg on that side. Thank you, Gregors. So please go and see it when you have the time. Please give a warm welcome to Alaa Minawi. I'm Marijn Lems, a theater critic for NRC and theaterkrant, among other publications, and I will moderate the rest of the talk. But the basis of this topic talk was the performance by DakhaBrakha last year, the opening act of the festival. Under the title, Shouldn't Artists Tear Down the Walls Between Friends and Enemies, Sruti published an opinion piece in which she asked critical questions about the choice for this opening act. In her eyes, the choice to project slogans on the wall that call to arm Ukraine now and Russia is a terrorist state, as well as other elements, turned the concert into an openly nationalistic and militaristic battle cry. She also decried the double standards of the audience in cheering on a Ukrainian presentation of this nature when, and I quote, "Undoubtedly, if this had been a Syrian, Afghan, or Palestinian band, the response would have been one of condemnation." End quote. She called for a deeper engagement of festivals and art events focused on overcoming war instead of winning it. Ira Melkonyan disagreed. In her response, she criticized Bala's statement of pacifism as a statement of privilege. For her and her family as Ukrainians, yelling, "We are not enemies" at an invasion force feels futile and absurd. War violence, she says, doesn't leave space for pastel colors. I quote, "Only when there is a definitive end to a war, we can speak about nuance, mourning, and reconstruction, but first the war has to end," end quote. She calls for a space for bodies that have experienced state violence in the academic and artistic discussion, and space for that body's anger and for its brokenness. Far from a nationalist manifestation, she saw DakhaBrakha's performance as honoring the sacrifice of the soldiers fighting for their loved ones. So, Sruti and Ira, that's a short recap of a much more nuanced pieces that you wrote last year. So maybe you can both reflect on, and I'll first ask Sruti to respond on what you wrote back then and how you reflect back on this discussion and these themes.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm a bit nervous somehow, suddenly, all of a sudden. I don't know why. So yeah, this, in fact, it's a special moment, and I also just want to express my gratitude to the Spring Festival for organizing this. I think it's very special that we had a discussion which was a civil discussion, and it didn't explode into some kind of social media, I don't know what, which we tend to see a lot, and that we are here and we are engaging with each other. And that in itself is a win and something a lesson to take home. So yeah, thinking back on the article, Ira's response and Gregor's response as well, and in the light of all that has happened since then, I'm sitting right now in the midst of an ongoing genocide. I personally feel that I'm more convinced by the idea that we cannot, that militarization and the call for militarization is not the solution. I completely understand. I know that it can come across as speaking from a point of privilege when one is far away and it's not my mother who's affected by it or something like this. But I think we need to make a distinction between militarization and a war regime, a regime of war, and the personal or even collective call for resistance, even armed resistance. And I think that distinction is perhaps where, if we can agree on that distinction, I think we will be able to find common ground. I'm not sure, Ira, what you think, but so to me that distinction is really important. It's not my place to question anyone's right to resistance, but I do feel I do want to push back against this idea that those who are opposed to militarization are somehow defeatist or naive or coming from a place of comfort alone. I think it's become very clear right now, also in the light of what's happened since then, that we are in what we are in right now globally is a war regime, and this war regime is spread out not just on a military level, but it is seeped into economic levels, it's seeped into governance, it's seeped into our social fabric, it's seeped into the way in which the division between friend and enemy has become like something we are all somehow holding on to. And I feel that needs to be resisted, and I think the arts are a place that must call for it, no matter how difficult that is, no matter how impossible it may be in the face of actual current attacks coming on us. But so I would like to stay with that, hold ground on that count. I think I feel vindicated about my observation about the Dutch response, which is indeed one of double standards.
So you mean the difference between how the response to the Ukrainian situation and the Palestinian situation?
Yes, absolutely. In the broader, I'm not talking about individuals here or general audience as such, but the broader national response towards Ukraine vis-a-vis Palestine. The differences stand out in many broad ways. But having watched the performance yesterday, in fact, there was a line I read in this Salvage magazine, which I thought, in fact, says something even more interesting. They say that it's not that Europe and US admire Ukrainians because they are white. So this comes back to this idea that, many people say it's, Ukrainians are white and therefore this is a form of racial discrimination, and that's why Ukraine was supported, whereas this is not. I think it's more complicated than that, because the relation between imperialism and racialization is, in fact, almost the opposite. So Ukrainians are white because they were white, or you could say, because they were convenient victims up to a certain point, and they may not be white for long. And the performance yesterday, in fact, made this stark for me, because there was, in contrast to DakhaBrakha, which was like call to arms, literally, all together, and this is against the Russian aggressor. There was yesterday, centerpiece of the performance was an accusation to Europe. An accusation to Europe where Ukraine has, on the one hand, of course, been supported militarily in very, very big numbers, but on the other hand, used as a kind of pawn. So, in fact, if we do not recognize that there is a war regime here between different forms of imperialisms, then we don't understand also the racial dynamics of it fully.
This seems like a good point to give the word to Ira. Actually, the same question to you. Of course, you don't have to respond to everything. Sruti just said point by point, more just a general question of you participated in this debate last year, and how do you feel about it looking, or what do you think about it now looking back?
Yeah, I also think, there's been a lot. So let's take it. And maybe, to go to the first question, how I feel in relation to May 2023 last year, that I feel this discussion is very relevant. Yeah. And I feel, that actually things that I wrote last year and my response to your article is still very relevant to me, and I still feel there, and I stand for all the words I wrote there. But like, again, a lot of doors you open there, Shruti. What's important for me to answer is that, or to highlight, is that I think sitting here and having this discussion already indeed shows that there is a lot of things in common actually between us and our positions. And of course, I am anti-war. I don't want war, and yes, I do want peace. And maybe the place where I come from, or the position that I try to bring is how do we try to understand people who do not have the choice of saying I'm anti-war. No one invited the war into our houses, no? And then how do we go from here? But there is no space of this choice, and I think me being there in that hall in the opening moment of the festival last year, the DakhaBrakha, was also my attempt to try and understand people coming with why do they come with these slogans, and this is the background to their music. The places of empathy and understanding that this is anger and this is pain, and it has place to be on stage, and it has place to be in this world and moment that we live in. And I want to have an open capacity to hear it and to reflect on it from my artistic and all my human capacities of being in this world today.
And did you see the opening act yesterday by any chance?
No, I did not see the opening act.
Because maybe I just want to make it more precise, Shruti, when you said that in the performance the point was made that the Ukrainian people are used as a pawn by the military-industrial complex. Was that an interpretation of yours, or is that literally being said in the performance?
I guess a mix. So it is in a way an interpretation of mine. That's how I was reading it, in the contrast, let's say, to what I experienced around the DakhaBrakha way of Europe. My reading was Europe was addressed in the DakhaBrakha concert as, you're helping us to fight this. And yesterday it was Europe was accused. Europe was so. In fact, it was your Europe doesn't. Where is this Ukraine in relation to this Europe? And that question was raised. And so, what has happened in that period? that's somehow where I was. I'm not sure whether you saying it's a pawn is the right term, perhaps not, but then we get into the intricacies of the war itself. And we're thinking more about artistic questions.
Yes.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to say anything about the performance last night because I wasn't there. So that, and maybe just as much as I understand, I think I wouldn't want to fall into the trap of trying to pitch victims of violence against each other into who would win, or like who would have a better place or empathy, or whether it's Ukrainians who will win, or I feel like there are multiple wars going on in this world right now, and people are fleeing countries not just because they decide so, but because there is a strong reason for this to happen. So there is maybe what I'm trying to say is that there are multiple actions that are needed at the same time, and of recognizing that these wars are happening, and at the same time seeing the complexities of multiple powers, but rooting the source of violence and nailing it. I think that's where my call for not the lack of nuance in general, but in certain situations, yes, we have to take a stance. Yeah. And then out of the stance, we can look for nuanced relationship to life and our positioning in this world. Yeah,
I feel that there is a certain disagreement then about the role of art in that sense, because also through your piece was called "Shouldn't Art Break Down the Borderlines Between Friends and Enemies?" Whereas you are now saying in some cases you have to name the enemy, you have to name who the perpetrator is. So do you feel, maybe Shruti, that there's some something to that?
There's definitely something to it. So, in fact, in an earlier conversation that we had in preparing this, I remember a moment when both alaa and Ira kind of said, well, why should art be peacemakers? What is this bourgeois idea, in a way? And I'm also thinking of, figures like Ira Melkonyan from the Freedom Theatre in Jenin, who said, we are part of the resistance. Or I'm also thinking of figures like, in the Pan-African tradition, anti-colonial struggles, people like Amilcar Cabral, who saw cultural resistance and armed struggle against colonialism coming together. So, of course, it's not about this very, kind of simplistic understanding of pacifism in that way. But I still feel that we need to separate the issue of militarization as a structural development, which is happening in a kind of much, much bigger structural, broader sense, which is seeping into all spheres of life. And I feel there's, and then the question is, when does armed struggle get catapulted into or taken over by this big war regime?
Maybe we can go over to you. You of course have, there's only, right, thanks. You of course have made several works that deal with state violence. As we said, your installation that's outside right now deals with the plight of refugees who flee from state violence. Also, your cycle 2048 is named after the 100-year anniversary of the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing campaign at the birth of the State of Israel. So you have dealt with this theme in your works. So when we talk about what the responsibility or the power or the role of art can be in response to these topics, how do you think about this as an artist?
First, hello everyone, and thank you for hosting me in this panel, this interesting debate or discussion or talk. I'm not going to call it war, personally. I'm not going to call it responsibility. I'm not going to call it emission because for me as an artist, when I started doing, for example, this installation, I did not think of it before. It was not a decision I want to make an installation about refugees. I was in Lebanon, and Lebanon is with the borders of Syria, and it was the first country that had a huge influx of Syrian refugees and then they moved to Europe. And still, 1/3 of the population of Lebanon is Syrian refugees currently. So I saw the situation around me like any other person, not as an artist, as a person. And talking about artist versus art, I mean, artists are the ones who make art. And if an artist is someone who, let's say, has tentacles, where they respond or they are sensitive to what is around them, from observation to noticing things, you cannot not notice war. You cannot not notice refugees around you. And making art based on what is happening around you becomes something that comes naturally, because this is the topic. This is what's happening. So, but then there is violence that comes. For example, with the Palestinian situation, as an artist, the violence of hiding your story, of asking you to disappear. That's what genocide is about, is actually asking you not to be here, to dissolve, to disappear from this world. It's canceling the human being completely. Then you feel as an artist that you have to say something, let your story be said, be told. I was telling my friend the other day that, now this year, I was saying, now it's our turn. This is the time where we are fashioning. Last year it was Ukraine, and the year before it was Syrian, and one day we will be forgotten. But we have been telling our stories and what has been happening in Palestine for 75 years. And without the art movement, like the one in Ramallah that you mentioned, that did art and did performances to keep their story going, maybe this whole movement that is happening now wouldn't have happened. So then art affects what is happening, not only is affected by what is happening. So I don't know if I didn't answer it.
Yeah. Now, also earlier in the other conversations, you said something about besides that the artist wants to speak about what he sees and what he notices, also that you feel that art should give space to the voices of the marginalized, of people who do not have voices. And so this also speaks to what you just said, the people who are being disappeared, let's say. Is this something that plays a large role in your artistic practice as well?
Because I can say that I come from a marginalized community and history somehow. My Light is Your Light has been touring for 10 years. It was supposedly about, in the beginning it was affected by the Syrian crisis, so it was about the Syrian refugees. But then for 10 years, each time it became for another refugee. So it was presented a few years ago in Amsterdam, I think, 2-3 years ago, where there was a neighborhood where the Jewish community there during World War I, lots of families were taken by the Nazis. The neighbors living there, the families who are descendants from that neighborhood, they asked for that installation to be there. And the same installation also now can be talking about the Ukrainian crisis last year, about the refugees. So it's about everyone who was forced to leave home. So in other words, it just keeps on developing in that sense.
Ira, also about this idea of marginalized voices, you say something in your piece about making space for the broken body, space for body that has experienced state violence and experienced war. Maybe you could expand on that a little, because I feel that this is relevant to what we're speaking about, because as you say, the broken body also is an uncomfortable presence in other spaces that are not in the middle of a war. And so you felt that is a value in and of itself.
Yeah, David, first of all, this is not my terminology. Daria Tsilvaluk came up with the term, broken, out of Sruti Bala, my colleague Victoria Melkonyan, who is a theater maker, formulated broken spectator, and I'm kind of just reading a collective body of knowledge from Ukrainian feminists who are also dealing now with how to bring together feminism and asking for arms, and how what's their position in that. I think also expands my thinking about it, and reading their pieces made me think about how problematic this is, how a body that comes from a war place watches art, engages with art, how does it affect them? And I thought that it's very relevant to bring this notion and make me think further about problematics of a broken spectator and what does it do to the art dynamic and us creating and watching and engaging with art. And maybe to add a bit further to something that we mentioned earlier about the role of art, I guess that's kind of the big, almost impossible subject for us to deal with, but somehow is an arch of our conversation today, not like what is the role of art in the times of war and conflict and state violence, or that you formulated. I just think I do not fully agree that art's role is peacemaking. It can be if someone chooses, but I also have the right to choose not to be a peacemaker, and I think that this is the art is about reflecting, and art is also about artists. I think that's a bit kind of what you said and what resonates with me. That I'm a cultural worker. I'm a body that is located in a certain place and has certain history, and this informs my art making. And it doesn't come just from the abstract realms, but I am affected by the histories and society I'm in and the times, and that it's kind of it's rooted now, and I think that art is a reflection. It's tentacles that go into the world, and me trying to sensitize myself to what is relevant today and bring it into a form, and in my case, bring on stage, or find the media to express what is relevant in the world and for the society. And it's a choice whether it's about peacemaking, and maybe it is about other emotions or other states or other meanings. It's trying to find forms for something that is maybe difficult to express.
Just wanted to add to that something. I mean, there could be the artist who is taking or stating out or voicing out their position from the conflict and the peacemaker. And there's also the artist who doesn't want to talk about anything related to it. And I think the three of them are political decisions. I don't believe there is a non-political art. Even doing non-political art is a political decision. Being oblivious to the realities around you is a political decision. We're not gonna drown, but with global warming or something. But it is a political decision. It's valid. It's not that it's not valid. It is someone who decided that there's so much violence around me. I do not want to deal with that reality. I want to talk about butterflies, because that makes me, this escapism somehow allows me to make this world, or imagine this world in a better place. I've been working for 2 years, even before the crisis in Pakistan, about futurism. I've been researching how Arab futurism, which stems out from Afrofuturism, which are two interesting movements at this stage that tries to reimagine the future, where people from marginalized community, or when the reality is different. It's very, both movements cannot exist. If you check or research the movements, you will see that they are so connected to the reality. Even those who are trying to reimagine a future cannot reimagine it without acknowledging what is happening and taking a stand. How can we make a change or imagine a different state without it?
Yeah, can I ask a little bit more, just like to continue this thought, because I also thought when this invitation came and this whole conversation about war on stage, I also had to reflect about my art making, and I thought, well, kind of that actually my choice is not to represent war on stage, and that there is also a difference between trying to understand other artists and why they choose this, and also making my own aesthetic and artistic decisions. And kind of my journey before the full-scale invasion in Ukraine was that my artistic universe was, well, still is, but I will explain the change, but back then was very, I would deal with subjects of fluidity, liquidity, climate, I don't know, thoughts on climate and how it can bleed into artistic space. And there was very little, I was not occupied with my identity so much. I left Ukraine 15 years ago, and kind of my previous piece was very philosophically, kind of had a certain distance, and it's like a philosophical reflection on metaphors that sparked me. And then suddenly I was confronted with the full-scale invasion of I am a Ukrainian artist. Suddenly it matters to me a lot, because this is my voice right now, and it can make a difference. And now I'm making a piece which I would have not imagined making 5 years ago. Now, and I feel also this is something similar that you were describing. It's not because, I was like, well, what's interesting that I'm going to speak about it, because suddenly it matters and it becomes part of your world, and that's what you need urgently to reflect on in your artistic space, in your artistic work as a cultural worker.
There was something else I was wondering about in this context, in the sense of what we are all saying now, that of course an artist should be free to make whatever art they want. But I think the original discussion that was started by Sruti was also the question of maybe, you don't mention the term propaganda in your opinion piece, Sruti, but I feel that there's some connection to it in the sense of when do we see art as still as propaganda for something? Because in your piece, in describing it as a nationalistic and militaristic battle cry, or that association was called up for you, it feels like also, okay, so maybe there's this borderline between when an artist tries to communicate something, or when an artist tries to follow the line of the military-industrial complex, or aligns with it too much. Is that something? Can we speak a little about the line between propaganda and art in that sense? Because I also feel that it's a bit in your piece, Ira, when you say the broken body that cries out for justice is an uncomfortable body, and maybe people who are not involved in that situation then quickly read it as propaganda because of the symbols that we use, for instance, in the DakhaBrakha performance, because we are used to, as an audience that is not completely submersed in war all the time, then we see these militaristic elements as propaganda maybe more quickly than they are meant. You also speak about this in your piece. So is that something?
Yes, so I do agree with you, Ira, that just the presence of one may not jump to a conclusion from what one sees on stage to saying, oh, this is propaganda or whatever it is. There are maybe many contextual and other factors that play a role, and indeed someone here may see it differently than someone who's coming from another. So all those factors are there, but I still think there's an issue of reinforcing the state, where the art is kind of reinforcing an idea that's already present, or whether it is somehow daring to shatter the status quo. And that's where for me your feminist discomfort and the uncomfortable body would come in. And that's where I feel, yes, that's what I would indeed think is what I would like to expect as a spectator, as a viewer. I want the things to shake me out of my given patterns of viewing the world. I want to view performance, or I want to listen to music which moves me out of that kind of stupor of some kind.
But that's what DakhaBrakha did, didn't it?
To that extent, we could perhaps say it succeeded in that. But we are not just looking at an aesthetic experience that is somehow in some vacuum. We're looking at it now from the hindsight of the last 2 years. There I do have a serious question about going with that, because there is a certain, I'm now going back to my own sort of shady memories, but there was a certain vibe in this hall here, huge, full, everyone there, and there was a bit of a kind of roar of enthusiasm for it, which is very different from what you are telling me about, someone who has been, it's different even from what DakhaBrakha intended, I think. And that indicates to me an atmosphere which is much bigger than just individual audience responses or so, but it indicates that this has become, like this is okay in one way or the other, in a broader social term. We're okay with it, with the exception of that one odd voice which threw in a boo into the room. But
what I think is interesting about it is that there's this roar, let's say, as you describe it, but also in the period between February and May, when the festival took place, there was this sort of, because let's say that we, as leftists, just to generalize for now, we're all.
You wish.
just to make a ground on which to stand to further this argument. We're all more pacifist before the invasion of Ukraine than we were right after. And this is also a sort of thought process that me and many of my left-wing peers went through, in the sense of that we had always said military action, that we were confronted with our own pacifism in a way, that we were confronted with, okay, maybe there's limits to this pacifism as well, considering what is going on in Russia, and maybe the right response now is to put up military presence there or support Ukraine in its military resistance in that sense. So I feel like in your question of shaking up the status quo, I understand what you're saying, that when you were in that hall and everybody was screaming for it, yes, this is what we want, then there's questions about whether or not it's really shaking up anything, but the whole situation itself, I feel, had shaken up the way that at least my peers were thinking about this question.
Yeah, but again, if we make the comparison to Palestine, we see what the contradictions are in this.
But if we look at Palestine, if the geopolitical situation were different, then we would maybe also want to send arms to the resistance there. If we were looking at it honestly, and we see that there's a genocide going on there, and if there was enough of a draagvlak, let's say, political will, then that would be the equivalent, right?
Yeah, but it isn't.
No, but I mean,
and that's the thing we're dealing with. And
but then we devolve it into sort of a whataboutism. So either we think, I agree that either we think that Palestine should also be supported by Western weapons, or we should think that neither of these should be.
Yeah, but I'm actually trying to say, would it not be the task of us who have nothing to do with arms. None of us here in this room even know how to operate a bloody MK-47. Okay, so like we are now talking about, yes, we should support or we should not support. Am I ready to go and hold that gun? No, I'm not. So I feel like we here who are in the field of the arts and culture should we not be talking about breaking out of that mode into another realm, however complicated that is. But come on, isn't that what we want from art as well? Like, isn't that what our aspiration needs to be? At least as an aspiration. If we lose that even as an aspiration, then we are completely into a war regime, is my fear.
I just wanted to add a bit, well, first of all, to the concert back there, which maybe we should not speak so much because maybe many people who are here weren't, but my reading of the room was different, and maybe that's what I want to bring, and you describing that everyone was agreeing and there was this feeling of like, yes, war, let's go. That was not my experience. I want to bring also that certain quality of the music of DakhaBrakha, for who I have incredible respect. They're amazing musicians, and I remember myself being, I don't know, 13-year-old teenager dancing with their music and being in this like, yeah, let's go. So they also bring a certain quality of energy that is not necessarily yes, war, but it's just like, yes, power, empowerment, and yeah, yes, let's do, which of course they bring a message because they come from Ukraine. They are all based in Kyiv there right now. Well, they tour a lot, but their families are there. So I wouldn't just say that there was only, my reading of the room was actually a lot of like confused faces around me as well, that there was something around unity of like, I could see who I was with the Ukrainian friend, last year at the opening, and yeah, I could recognize who were the people who came from Ukraine. I could see some confusion on some Western faces, but there was a lot going on, I felt, in that room. It wasn't just like, yes, let's take the, and maybe another thought I thought with none of us being able to operate the gun, is just that I must admit that I'm asking myself this question more and more, like, am I ready to take the gun? And I'm like, you answering now, like, no, absolutely not. And I'm not saying that I'm pro-military. I'm just saying that this question has become, like, very close. I cannot avoid it, no? And I didn't ask for it to come. It's not that I want guns everywhere. I totally agree that it's problematic, but it's just very close. And I do ask myself, should I continue making art? And yes, I still make a choice to be here and to make art and to reflect on this world through nuanced prism of looking at this world. But at the same time, I'm very confronted with these questions. Like, yeah, how not to be disempowered? How do I find my power and my strength, and what is meaningful out of the palette of my actions in this world right now? Unfortunately, guns are in that list of choices that I have to seriously think about, no?
Yeah, I'm taking a breath before it.
Sorry.
Because I do relate to what you said. Yeah, I do relate to what you said. And I still don't ask myself if I will hold arm, but I ask myself if I'm gonna die for this cause. Because in the Palestinian history, a lot of artists and writers who lived in London and the UK got assassinated by the Israelis because they made art pieces about Palestine, Palestinian stories. Because they became famous, because their stories became heard, more and more heard, and then they got assassinated. So not at this stage, it does not become a choice, you know. But then you decide: do you accept and again dissolve and become silent, or you say, no, I'm going to keep on talking, at least talking about, because when we're talking about militarization, it's not only a weapon, it's also the fact that there is a conflict and you are engaged in defending yourself and your life, and your family, and your people, and your land, and like everything, your history, in that. So everything is part of it, including art. But at the same time, I think art has a place for everything. Art should have a place for peacemakers, and art should have a place for the sides, people who decided to defend themselves somehow, because that's how I call it now. But it shouldn't be one of this doesn't cancel the other, you know. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, why? And then again, what affects what? Am I affected by the situation, or am I affecting the situation, or is it a continuous cycle?
Probably both, no? Probably we're affected.
Yeah, most probably is. I mean, after World War II, there was a huge artistic movements that came out of that war. Certain genres came out of that war. Was it a decision? Did an artist came out like, I'm going to create a new art? I think it was impacted and affected what was happening in the situation. Who affects what is a good question. And does the artist have or has to hold a position of higher moral value because he or she is or they is an artist? I'm not sure. It's as if I need to have that responsibility as an artist to impact the art movement. I'm not going to affect them. I'm doing an installation here and that's it. If that affects someone who's in a bike, then it's fine. And for me, that is enough. I believe that is enough. Working on the macro level, micro level.
Something else that we could speak about in a broader sense of what the responsibility of art as in the sense of the art world has towards these kinds of conflicts is in the case of cultural boycotts. As we've seen in the case of Ukraine, most Western institutions quite quickly embraced a boycott of collaborations with Russian institutions. There were of course also sanctions. Our own government asked cultural institutions and universities to suspend collaborations. With Palestine, obviously, we're seeing the opposite thing, where students ask for boycotts, they're being ignored at best, and faced with police brutality at worst. So I was wondering what you feel that the responsibility of the art world in these cases should be. Do you believe in cultural boycotts, or as you say, alaa, there should be space for everything in the art world, so also for the cultural expressions of those countries that are engaging in war crimes, let's say. Anyone?
It depends, right? When you are boycotting a cultural institution that is directly funding the war regime, the genocide, that's something. Yeah. The problem is, boycott is, for me, boycotting, for example, in my situation, the Israeli institutions, is almost like the last resort. Because you cannot do anything else. You know? You took the land, you're occupying, you're torturing prisoners, you're killing children, you're destroying hospitals. You're openly, publicly saying you want to obliterate the whole city population and kick them out from the whole country, literally. I have the right not to talk to you. I mean, you're denying me the right not to talk to you, and you want to do all this violence, and you also want to force me to talk? Really? I mean, this is, I think, the last resort about that thing, but because there is nothing else to do. I mean, there is no global support for Palestinians that could pressure Israel to change, and it has been proven they didn't change, they will not change. So the only thing left is doing these kind of boycotts, which is basically saying that what you're doing is not okay, and you cannot just live your life normally while destroying the whole country and people. That's what for me boycott is, at least in that situation. Does it mean that dialogue is not accepted, peacemaking? No, it is, but when it becomes real, when it becomes a real dialogue, when it becomes a real will to make, unfortunately the whole world is going right way. I don't know if you noticed that. But like this, I mean, I'm also asking myself this question, as an artist who's going to talk about that story, or as an artist from Ukraine, what does a Dutch audience relate to in this? Is this important? At what level is why am I doing theater talking about Palestine in the Netherlands? And is it the same theater when I do it in the Netherlands if I do it in Beirut? I cannot do it in Palestine because I cannot go there. I'm not allowed to go there. But let's say if I go to Lebanon and do it, it's a different audience. I think what we are, that's how I see myself these days. We are a warning of what is going to come. If you allow the right wing to take over, if you allow all this violence, this rhetoric of violence against the LGBT community, and against all the rights that are happening all over the world, we are just a sample of what will be. Russia is a few hundred kilometers away, and Ukraine is a few hundred kilometers away. It's not that far. Some people think that really that doesn't concern them. And that's a mistake. At least that's what I try to say when I do my artworks here.
About cultural boycott still, yeah?
Yeah, but on the boycott, so with regard to the following the guidelines of PACP, so the Palestinian campaign for academic and cultural boycott, I endorse it, and I've endorsed it since the time when it was called out. I think it was 2009 or some, I forget when it was originally called out. Maybe it was the date of the PACP when it was announced. So I just pulled out in my notes some statistics from the 13th of March from Palestinian Cultural Ministry. 54 cultural centers, 45 artists, 372 schools, 19 colleges and universities, more than 7,000 students, more than 100 university teachers, and more than 300 school teachers have been killed in the last 7, close to 8 months. Let's fathom this, the scale of this. And let's understand that culture and the arts have been mobilized as a tool of propaganda. I mean, it's even in the books of Israeli Hasbara that they have a British PR firm which is all doing this work.
I think you have to explain the term Hasbara for me.
Yeah, so Hasbara is the word, is PR. But basically it amounts to propaganda. So it's the use of culture as a means to divert attention away from the genocide, which we see when the Jerusalem Quartet is invited here to perform in the Concert Chabad, when all big stars in the Eurovision, etc., etc. So if we don't see through that, then we become complicit. And cultural institutions that host these Israeli institutions which are funded by the Israeli state or corporations which are complicit in the genocide is very simple. And it's a tool that we have, that we need to use, and we have a precedent for doing it also from South Africa, apartheid South Africa. That's where PACP learned its method from. So in the current context of Palestine, I really don't get it, what Dutch institutions are thinking.
Well, let's ask them. No, in a general sense, of course, now I would like also to turn the question over to you, but maybe also that people who are involved with cultural institutions who are here would like to also answer these questions, because for my own part, I set up a project in the fall called Theaterkrant, together with a lot of other artists and arts-related people. And what we noticed was that the question was not so much to boycott anything, but to organize evenings around the genocide in Gaza and to come together and mourn and and feel anger, and lots of institutions just didn't know how to deal with this question because of all the discussion and all the sensitivity of the issue in the Dutch context. But I also noticed that these kinds of political questions, most Dutch cultural institutions are not equipped to deal with them, to take a position in them. They would rather that these discussions take place outside of their institutions, or that's what my experience was in approaching a lot of these institutions.